For over 10,000 standard cycles, the Galactic Empire had defined power for the rest of the stars. Power was mass measured in kilometers of hull. Power was energy output that bent sensors into static. Power was fleets so large they eclipsed suns and moved with ceremonial precision, their formations rehearsed centuries before they were ever needed. Wars were not fought so much as announced, and most ended before the first weapon discharged. Entire civilizations collapsed under the promise of imperial intervention alone. The Empire did not need speed. It did not need adaptation. It did not need urgency. Its enemies learned its patterns, feared them, and surrendered accordingly. Doctrine was ritual. Command was hierarchy. Victory was inevitable. Every species accepted this truth because it had never been challenged. Humanity entered imperial records quietly. A young species from an unstable spiral arm, orbiting an unremarkable yellow star. Short-lived, emotionally volatile, biologically inefficient. Their technological curve was erratic, rapid advances followed by stagnation, brilliant innovation paired with crude execution. No unified empire, no ruling caste, no psychic command infrastructure. Their expansion lacked elegance and coherence, spreading through nearby systems like water leaking through fractured stone. Imperial analysts classified them as adaptable but fragile. Dangerous only to themselves. They built ships differently. Not sleek, not symmetrical, not beautiful. Human vessels looked assembled rather than designed, layered with armor instead of shield filigree, bristling with redundant systems where other species would place ceremony. They favored numbers over spectacle, durability over intimidation. To the Empire, this suggested insecurity. Species that trusted their strength did not build backups for everything. What unsettled Imperial observers was not human technology, but human behavior. They did not posture. They did not broadcast power signatures. They did not establish borders through declaration. Human-controlled space was marked only by navigational warnings and automated advisories, polite in tone, firm in content. Trespassers were redirected, not threatened. Repeated violations were intercepted, not destroyed. This was interpreted as indecision. As humanity expanded, they did not demand tribute. They did not subjugate neighbors. They traded. They negotiated. They fortified quietly. Imperial client species along the fringe reported something strange. Humans prepared for conflict even when peace was assured. Infrastructure hardened. Supply lines were diversified. Civilian industry mirrored military capacity with uncomfortable precision. Still, no capital fleets appeared. No grand armadas. No symbols worthy of attention. The Empire concluded humanity did not understand war. That assumption hardened into policy. When Imperial survey data showed human industrial output rivaling mid-tier client states, the Admiralty dismissed it as inefficiency masked by volume. When scouts reported human fleets operating without centralized command vessels, analysts assumed disorganization. When long-range sensors failed to predict human maneuvers, blame was assigned to faulty equipment, not flawed doctrine. After all, power was visible. And humans displayed very little of it. The decision to observe was routine. A standard Imperial flotilla was dispatched, not as a threat, but as a reminder. Its presence alone would clarify hierarchy. This was how order was maintained. Lesser species always reacted the same way: panic, submission, hurried diplomacy. Humanity would be no different. As the flotilla crossed into human space, its commanders felt no tension. No alarms. No battle readiness. This was not a war. It was instruction. Yet something subtle began to erode their confidence. Human space was silent in a way that felt deliberate. Not empty. Organized. Traffic patterns shifted smoothly. Civilian vessels altered course long before the flotilla approached, as if warned by systems the Empire could not detect. No distress signals. No defensive lines. No fear. The Empire had arrived expecting to demonstrate power. Instead, it had arrived to an audience that had already planned for it. And for the first time in Imperial history, the question surfaced, not aloud, but unavoidably. What kind of species prepares this thoroughly for a war it never announces? The Imperial flotilla advanced without altering formation, its presence announced by emissions alone. This was how hierarchy was communicated. Lesser powers reacted before contact was necessary. Humanity did not. No fleets surged forward. No defensive rings activated. Space remained orderly, traffic rerouted with quiet efficiency, as if the arrival had been scheduled long in advance. Only after the flotilla crossed the outer boundary did human vessels appear. Not from a single direction, not in a grand reveal, but individually, emerging along trade lanes and patrol routes already in motion. They were inconsistent in size and shape, some clearly retrofitted civilian hulls, others purpose-built warships layered in armor plates that overlapped like scales. None carried markings of rank. None occupied a central position. Imperial analysts searched for the command ship and found nothing. The humans did not rush. They maneuvered with deliberate restraint, keeping distance while constantly adjusting relative position. Formation dissolved and reformed without signal flares or broadcast commands. Imperial sensors detected encrypted traffic, but no single source dominated. Every ship spoke. Every ship listened. It was coordination without hierarchy, movement without ceremony. A transmission arrived at last, carried on open channels. The voice was calm, unadorned, devoid of ritual cadence. The human representative did not announce titles or lineage. They identified their location, acknowledged Imperial presence, and requested clarification of intent. Not permission. Not submission. Clarification. The flotilla commander interpreted this as hesitation. He responded with formal declarations of imperial authority, listing the Empire's victories, its reach, its expectation of compliance. The response from the human fleet was silence, not defiance, but consideration. Ships shifted again, subtly, tightening distance between one another, never closing fully, never retreating. Imperial gunners noted firing solutions forming and dissolving before locks could complete. Human vessels behaved as if anticipating threats before they were finalized. The demonstration order was issued. A single Imperial cruiser powered its primary emitter, releasing a controlled discharge intended to disable sensors and propulsion. It was a lesson, not a strike. The energy wave expanded outward, brilliant and absolute, designed to overwhelm lesser defenses. Human ships did not scatter. Instead, some advanced directly into the wave while others pulled back, altering vectors at the last possible moment. Energy bled across armored hulls, systems flickering but not failing. One vessel lost maneuvering thrust and drifted. Rather than protect it, nearby ships adjusted to place it forward, exposed, drawing targeting attention. Imperial targeting systems recalculated. Then recalculated again. New human ships appeared, not arriving through standard jump points, but slipping into space at close range, their signatures briefly chaotic before stabilizing. Smaller craft deployed from larger hulls. Cargo frames opened to reveal missile racks. Medical ships positioned themselves alongside combat vessels as if casualties were expected, not feared. The flotilla commander realized the error too late. This was not a defensive posture. It was a diagnostic one. The human fleet was not responding emotionally. It was gathering data, measuring reaction time, testing doctrines. Every Imperial action produced immediate adjustment across human lines, not from orders issued, but from shared understanding. Another transmission followed, identical in tone to the first. The human voice noted the energy discharge, identified it as a hostile demonstration, and stated calmly that continued escalation would be met proportionally. There was no threat in the words. Only certainty. Imperial officers felt something unfamiliar settle over the bridge. They were no longer being observed. They were being studied. For the first time, Imperial doctrine offered no guidance. The humans had not challenged authority, nor acknowledged it. They had not attacked, nor retreated. They had demonstrated readiness without hostility, capability without display. The flotilla existed inside a system already optimized to contain it, react to it, and if required, dismantle it. The realization spread quietly across Imperial command channels, unspoken but undeniable. Fear did not arrive suddenly. It formed slowly, through disciplined minds forced to admit uncertainty. And uncertainty had favored the Empire. The order to escalate came from doctrine, not confidence. Imperial command authorized a limited strike designed to end uncertainty without provoking full engagement. Precision weapons armed, target solutions finalized, the flotilla prepared to reassert the logic the galaxy had obeyed for millennia. The first shots were measured. Energy lances fired in controlled intervals, aimed to cripple propulsion and command systems. Imperial tacticians expected panic, retreat, fragmentation. Instead, the human response unfolded like a machine completing a process already in motion. Human ships dispersed, not outward, but laterally and vertically, exploiting dimensions Imperial formations rarely used. Some accelerated directly into fire lanes, armor-absorbing punishment, while broadcasting telemetry across the fleet. Others vanished from sensors for fractions of a second, reappearing at angles that invalidated targeting predictions. Damage did not slow coordination. It refined it. Imperial shields began to fail in ways no simulation had predicted. Not from overload, but from precision. Human weapons struck repeatedly at the same microregions, kinetic rounds traveling at velocities that ignored shield harmonics entirely. Mass met energy, and energy yielded. Hulls buckled. Systems cascaded. Reinforcements were requested. They arrived, and immediately began to die. Human vessels appeared among them without warning, not emerging from hyperspace lanes but tearing through space itself in microtransits too brief to track. There was no grand arrival, no buildup of signatures. One moment space was empty, the next it was occupied by ships already aligned for impact. Imperial command nodes went dark. Not destroyed, isolated. Communication relays were severed with surgical accuracy, leaving ships operational but blind. Command hierarchy collapsed into fragments, each vessel fighting with incomplete information. This had never happened before. Imperial fleets were built around central authority. Without it, they were monuments drifting into chaos. The humans exploited this instantly. They did not concentrate fire. They dismantled capability. Weapon mounts vanished. Engines failed. Shield generators ruptured. Ships were left intact but powerless, tumbling in silence while human craft flowed past them like water around stone. Some Imperial crews attempted surrender protocols. Human ships acknowledged receipt and adjusted fire away from them without hesitation. Medical craft moved in tandem with assault units. Recovery teams boarded disabled Imperial vessels mid-conflict, extracting wounded while battles still raged nearby. This behavior defied comprehension. Mercy was a post-war construct, not something extended under fire. Imperial officers watching from shattered bridges finally understood the truth too vast to ignore. This was not a fleet. It was an ecosystem. Every human ship was expendable, yet none were wasted. Losses were absorbed without hesitation, compensated by replacements already en route from hidden vectors. Manufacturing ships deployed autonomous forges. Ammunition was fabricated in transit. Repairs occurred inside the engagement zone, under fire, as if danger were simply another variable to manage. The humans did not seek decisive victory. They sought inevitability. A transmission cut through the chaos, carried on open channels once more. The same calm voice spoke, reporting Imperial losses with uncomfortable accuracy, outlining remaining operational capacity, predicting collapse timelines if resistance continued. The message concluded with an offer to disengage, providing coordinates and safe passage corridors. Imperial pride rejected it. Human response to the refusal was immediate and devastatingly restrained. Fire intensified, not randomly, but precisely where morale would fracture first. Command vessels were neutralized last, forced to witness the systematic erasure of their options. Resistance slowed, then stalled entirely. For the first time in recorded history, an Imperial fleet faced annihilation not because it was outmatched in strength, but because its opponent had designed war itself as a solvable problem. Doctrine failed. Tradition failed. Fear became irrelevant. What remained was clarity. The humans were not fighting the Empire. They were disassembling it. Imperial Command reacted the only way it knew how. A full battle group was dispatched, its arrival intended to crush resistance through overwhelming presence. Massive hulls translated into the system in perfect formation, their weapons charged, their banners broadcast across every channel. This was the language of finality the galaxy had always obeyed. The humans did not mirror the display. Their forces multiplied instead of consolidating. New vessels emerged from industrial platforms, from carrier frames hidden inside logistics convoys, from civilian traffic that shed outer hulls to reveal reinforced cores. Mining ships armed rail cannons. Transport craft deployed drone swarms. Repair vessels positioned themselves deliberately in exposed zones, trusting their escorts without question. Imperial targeting systems flagged the chaos as disorganization. They were wrong. Human movements followed no single pattern because they followed many at once. Fleets separated into task webs, each operating independently while feeding data into a shared operational lattice. No strike was isolated. No loss went unanswered. When Imperial ships focused fire on one cluster, another cluster severed supply lines behind them. When shields flared to maximum output, engines failed under kinetic saturation. Every Imperial reaction opened a new vulnerability. The Empire fought to dominate space. The humans fought to remove function. Command relays vanished next. Not destroyed, but disabled with precision strikes that left hulls intact and crews alive. Without coordination, Imperial captains defaulted to doctrine, repeating maneuvers that had worked for centuries. Humans anticipated them all. They had studied the Empire's wars, its victories, its rituals. Predictability was treated as an exploitable flaw. Imperial morale began to fracture. Ships attempted to regroup and found no clear axis of command. Requests for orders went unanswered. Navigation solutions conflicted. Some captains chose to charge forward, others to retreat. Human fleets adapted instantly, sealing escape routes without closing traps. There was no panic in their maneuvers, no aggression beyond necessity. The efficiency was unsettling. Then the unthinkable occurred. Imperial vessels began surrendering in the middle of active combat. Human response was immediate and consistent. Fire ceased around surrendering ships. Boarding parties arrived with medical teams already prepared. Wounded Imperial crew were stabilized alongside human casualties without distinction. Escape pods were retrieved instead of ignored. No prisoners were executed. No vessels were claimed as trophies. This restraint spread faster than fear ever had. Imperial crews realized they were safer disarmed than fighting. Entire squadrons powered down weapons voluntarily. Human ships adjusted fire patterns to avoid them without pause, as if surrender had been anticipated as an expected outcome, not a surprise. Imperial historians watching the battlefield reached a conclusion that chilled them more than loss. Humanity had done this before. Not to others, but to themselves. Their wars had been frequent, brutal, and unforgiving. They had refined logistics under fire, built redundancy into culture, learned to sustain conflict longer than enemies could endure it. What the Empire called escalation, humans called management. As Imperial resistance collapsed, human forces did not pursue annihilation. They isolated remaining threats, dismantled weapons, and stabilized space lanes. Supply nodes were seized intact. Communication networks were repurposed to broadcast ceasefire corridors. The system was secured not as conquered territory, but as neutralized danger. The final transmission from human command carried no triumph. It stated that continued resistance would prolong unnecessary loss. It clarified that the Empire was no longer a threat in this system. It offered structured withdrawal, medical assistance, and diplomatic contact once hostilities ceased. The Empire had never faced an enemy that treated war as a process with an endpoint. By the time Imperial leadership understood what was happening, the conflict had already been solved. The humans had not fought to prove superiority. They had fought to ensure the Empire could never again mistake dominance for safety. The Galactic Council convened in silence, its chambers filled with representatives who had once spoken as masters of known space. Now they listened. Survivors of the engagement transmitted records stripped of emotion and embellishment. Tactical data. Medical logs. Communications transcripts. There were no heroic last stands in the archives, no glorious charges. Only evidence of a force that had arrived, acted, and withdrawn once the outcome was mathematically certain. The question that echoed through the chamber was not how the Empire had lost, but what it had faced. Imperial analysts presented their conclusions with visible restraint. Humanity had not deployed a fleet in the conventional sense. There was no singular formation to defeat, no command node to decapitate, no symbolic vessel whose destruction would end resistance. What the Empire had encountered was a distributed response organism, capable of expansion, contraction, and regeneration under pressure. A human fleet was not a collection of ships. It was an integrated system spanning industry, logistics, medicine, and diplomacy, all synchronized toward a single objective: containment. Human doctrine did not pursue conquest. It eliminated instability. Imperial power structures had relied on fear and spectacle, projecting dominance outward to prevent challenge. Humanity inverted the model. They built inward first, fortifying supply chains, redundancy, and adaptability until external threats became irrelevant. When conflict arrived, they did not seek to intimidate. They sought to resolve. The Council learned that human vessels were rarely built solely for war. Cargo ships carried modular weapon systems. Medical ships doubled as command relays. Civilian infrastructure mirrored military resilience by design. Humanity assumed conflict as a constant variable, not an exception. Their society functioned because it could endure disruption without collapse. Former client species began submitting independent reports. Human occupation zones showed no resource extraction, no forced labor, no cultural suppression. Local governance remained intact. Trade routes reopened under human escort. Reconstruction followed containment without delay. To many, the humans appeared less as conquerors and more as custodians of stability. This frightened the Council more than defeat ever could. A species that sought power could be negotiated with. A species that sought order could be resisted. A species that sought neither, but prepared relentlessly for worst outcomes, could not be coerced. Humanity had not risen to rule the galaxy. It had risen to prevent anyone else from doing so again. A final transmission from human diplomatic channels arrived days later. It acknowledged the Empire's historical role, recognized the scale of its losses, and outlined terms not of surrender, but coexistence. The Empire would dismantle its coercive hierarchy. Its fleets would be limited. Its client systems would be free to choose affiliation. Humanity offered support, not oversight. Compliance was not demanded. Consequences were simply implied through demonstrated reality. The Council voted unanimously to accept. In the cycles that followed, military doctrines across the galaxy were rewritten. Fleet aesthetics shifted away from spectacle. Redundancy became valued. Logistics officers gained authority once reserved for admirals. War colleges taught the human model not as an ideal, but as a warning. When asked to define what they had faced, surviving Imperial commanders struggled to answer. They could describe the weapons. They could describe the losses. They could not describe the fear properly, because it had not come from destruction, but from understanding. Humanity did not need to threaten the galaxy. It had already shown what happened when preparation replaced arrogance, when resilience replaced dominance, and when a species decided that survival, not supremacy, would shape the future of the stars.